Imagine waking to find your entire city under siege, every street aflame, the cries of citizens echoing through smoke-filled skies, and knowing that the only way to protect your throne is to destroy everything you once called home. This is the story of an emperor whose fear of losing power led him to a choice so harrowing, so irreversible, that it would haunt history forever. Every decision, every action teetered on the edge of survival and catastrophe. The empire over which he ruled had once been the jewel of the continent, a city of gleaming palaces, bustling markets, and streets alive with culture, commerce, and tradition. Generations had built it, brick by brick, layer by layer, weaving a tapestry of wealth, artistry, and influence that stretched across borders. Yet power, as history often reveals, is a fragile possession, constantly threatened by ambition, betrayal, and the inexorable rise of rivals. The emperor, a man both revered and feared, understood this reality more acutely than most. From the moment he ascended to the throne, he was surrounded by whispers, some subtle, some dangerously overt, hinting at conspiracies, discontent among generals, and plots to unseat him. Every festival, every court gathering, became a stage where loyalty was measured not just by words, but by subtle gestures, alliances, and the careful monitoring of intent. Scholars studying his reign note that he was both brilliant and paranoid, a combination that allowed him to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics with remarkable skill, yet also made him hyper-aware of threats, real or imagined. Over time, intelligence reports arrived with increasing frequency. Spies captured discussions of rebellion, merchants murmured about rising dissent, and foreign envoys brought news of alliances forming beyond the empire's borders. The emperor's advisors urged caution, recommending strategic concessions, measured reforms, or even temporary retreats to secure stability. But he feared that hesitation would be interpreted as weakness. He believed that only decisive, sometimes ruthless action could preserve his sovereignty. By the time the threat materialized into a tangible siege, he had already considered every scenario: defensive fortifications, evacuation routes, and even contingency plans that involved the unthinkable. Every step he contemplated carried consequences not just for himself, but for the countless civilians who had built the life and city he now ruled. And while some of his choices were driven by necessity, others reflected a profound obsession with control, the desire to ensure that no one could challenge his authority without consequence. In the end, the emperor faced a harrowing dilemma: protect the throne by sacrificing the city, or preserve the city and risk losing everything he fought to maintain. Each option was fraught with peril. Each carried irreversible consequences, and each tested the limits of human morality, leadership, and the price of absolute power. Scholars often ask, was he a tyrant acting out of fear, or a ruler making a tragic choice for survival? History, it seems, remembers both. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your feedback in the comments. The day the siege began, the emperor awoke before dawn, the city still shrouded in a fragile calm that belied the chaos about to descend. Couriers had returned with intelligence that the enemy forces, vast and relentless, were closing in on the outer walls, their banners visible on distant hills, moving like a dark tide that threatened to swallow everything in its path. He walked through the palace corridors, listening to the faint creak of wooden floors and the murmur of guards, absorbing the weight of responsibility that pressed upon him with every step. His advisors gathered, speaking in urgent, clipped tones, each word measured and deliberate. Yet beneath the surface, fear trembled in their voices. He studied maps, tracing the enemy's approach, noting choke points, rivers, and fortifications, imagining the path they would take and the likely positions of their commanders. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet, merchants shuttering shops, families clutching their children, and the occasional soldier making rounds, eyes wide with apprehension. The emperor understood that panic was as deadly as any sword. Morale would crumble faster than stone walls if fear overtook reason. Orders were given swiftly, barricades raised, gates reinforced, and archers positioned along key walls. Scouts and messengers ran tirelessly, carrying updates and dispatches, each report adding to a mental mosaic the emperor had been constructing for weeks. He considered evacuation, but the thought of leaving the city, of allowing the streets he had walked since childhood to fall into enemy hands, filled him with a deep, visceral dread. Every decision required weighing life against legacy, duty against instinct. The enemy struck first with bombardment, catapults hurling stones at shattered gates and roofs, sending debris raining onto the frightened populace below. Fires broke out, consuming warehouses and homes, and smoke twisted into the dawn sky, turning it a bloodied orange. Civilians screamed, soldiers shouted, and through it all, the Emperor moved with calculated urgency, issuing commands, assessing the damage, and adjusting defenses. He ordered controlled counterattacks, sending small squads to harass the enemy, disrupt formations, and buy time, understanding that delay could be as valuable as victory. Advisors suggested surrender in certain sectors, hoping to preserve lives. But he refused, knowing that concessions would signal weakness and embolden rebellion within the city itself. As the day wore on, the siege intensified. The enemy scaled walls, breached gates, and the clash of steel against steel reverberated through streets and palaces alike. He walked among his generals, listening, advising, and sometimes silently observing, noting who faltered under pressure and who rose to the occasion. Each encounter with the enemy forced split-second decisions, whether to commit reserves, reinforce defenses, or sacrifice territory for strategic advantage. Meanwhile, citizens hid in basements, churches, and cellars, terrified yet compliant, following instructions of survival, the Emperor's presence a fragile reassurance in the chaos. Nightfall brought no relief. Torches flickered against smoke-choked skies, illuminating collapsed buildings and scattered corpses. Fires continued to burn, consuming parts of the city in a grim, relentless march. Yet the Emperor pressed on, understanding that action, however harrowing, was necessary. It was then, as reports confirmed breaches in multiple sectors, that he faced the unthinkable choice to destroy parts of the city himself to halt the enemy advance. Orders were dispatched to rig key structures with controlled fires and explosives, creating barriers that would delay the enemy, sacrificing homes, shops, and warehouses. The decision was met with stunned silence among his closest advisors, some questioning the morality, others the necessity. He remained resolute, knowing that delay and destruction could buy the kingdom time, preserve the throne, and potentially save thousands from slaughter at enemy hands. Over the following hours, the controlled devastation was executed. Buildings burned in precise sequences, bridges collapsed to cut off approaches, and streets were turned into labyrinths of fire and rubble. Civilians fled as best they could, guided by soldiers who risked their lives to maintain order and prevent panic from spreading further. The Emperor moved among them, offering brief words of reassurance. Even as he watched the city he loved transform into a weapon against its own invaders. Observers and chroniclers later noted the surreal horror of the scene. A city burning under the command of the very ruler who had built and nurtured it, the line between protector and destroyer blurred into a single, horrifying act of necessity. The enemy, confronted with these unexpected barriers and strategic fires, faltered, misjudged paths, and suffered losses that slowed their advance significantly. In private chambers, the Emperor allowed himself a rare moment of reflection, staring at maps, reports, and the distant glow of flames, calculating next moves, anticipating retaliation, and acknowledging the irreversible cost of his choices. Historical experts note that the psychological impact on both citizens and enemy troops was immense. Fear, confusion, and awe intertwined, shaping behavior in ways that pure military force could not. By the second night, the enemy's momentum had been disrupted, yet the city lay partially destroyed, its streets scarred, its people traumatized, and its very heart on fire. Advisors implored him to rest, to consider alternate tactics, but he continued tirelessly, personally overseeing defensive measures, coordinating counterattacks, and ensuring that no further breaches could endanger the remaining population. It was in these relentless hours that the Emperor's leadership was most visible, a combination of strategic brilliance, psychological insight, and a willingness to make devastating decisions to protect both throne and populace. And while the destruction weighed heavily on his conscience, he recognized that every sacrifice, every scorched street, was a calculated act designed to preserve the greater whole, to ensure survival against forces that threatened annihilation. By dawn of the third day, the immediate threat had been blunted. Enemy forces were disoriented, supply lines strained, and their initial advantage dissipated. Yet the Emperor knew that the siege was far from over, that further challenges awaited, and that every subsequent decision would demand the same unflinching resolve. The city he had destroyed to save had been transformed into both a fortress and a warning, a symbol of ruthless necessity, and the embodiment of the agonizing choices that power can compel. He walked the burned streets, witnessing the consequences of his orders firsthand, each ruin a testament to the harrowing intersection of leadership, survival, and the human cost of absolute authority. The enemy, frustrated and confused, began to reassess strategy, underestimating neither the emperor's resolve nor the lengths he was willing to go to preserve his reign. As the second phase of the siege unfolded, the emperor faced challenges that were both external and internal, testing his capacity to lead under extraordinary pressure. The enemy, having been slowed by the initial destruction, regrouped and attempted to exploit perceived weaknesses in the city's defenses. They probed walls, launched night raids, and spread disinformation among the populace, seeking to undermine morale and incite chaos. The emperor, however, anticipated these maneuvers. He had studied the enemy's patterns meticulously, reviewing intelligence reports from scouts and informants, analyzing tendencies, and predicting likely strategies with remarkable accuracy. Even in the darkest hours, he remained visible among his generals and soldiers, walking ramparts, examining fortifications, and speaking directly to officers to ensure clarity of command. His presence alone became a stabilizing force, reassuring citizens and troops alike that leadership was active, decisive, and unwavering. Civilians, though traumatized by the initial fires and destruction, began to adapt to harsh new reality, following emergency protocols and seeking shelter in designated zones, guided by soldiers and messengers trained to maintain order. The emperor understood the importance of the psychological dimension. Fear, confusion, and hopelessness could spread faster than any invading army, and preserving human will was as critical as defending stone walls. In one particular sector, where a critical gate had been damaged by enemy bombardment, the emperor personally oversaw repairs, directing carpenters, masons, and soldiers in a coordinated effort to restore the defensive structure before dawn. As he worked, he considered not only the physical construction but the symbolic message of resilience. Every repaired wall, every barricaded street, demonstrated that the city, though scarred, would not yield. Meanwhile, advisors continued to present alternatives, weighing negotiations, counterattacks, or tactical retreats, yet the emperor remained steadfast in his chosen course. He had accepted that the city itself was both a shield and a weapon, and every strategic sacrifice served a purpose greater than immediate preservation. The enemy attempted a surprise infiltration through underground tunnels, an audacious maneuver that threatened to bypass fortifications entirely. Soldiers stationed at concealed entrances engaged in tense skirmishes, and the emperor coordinated reinforcements with precise timing, using both intelligence and intuition to counter the threat. Casualties occurred, both among defenders and civilians inadvertently caught in the crossfire, and each loss weighed heavily on him. Yet he remained focused, understanding that hesitation could result in far greater devastation. As night fell, fires continued to rage, illuminating the smoke-choked streets, and the emperor moved tirelessly to command posts, issuing orders, monitoring morale, and ensuring communication lines remained intact. Expert historians later emphasized his methodical approach, integrating tactical defense, psychological insight, and direct oversight, was a masterclass in crisis leadership, blending intellect with intuition under extreme duress. He also leveraged misinformation to confuse the enemy. False signals, staged troop movements, and decoy fortifications diverted attacks, buying critical time to reinforce weak points. Within the palace, he convened briefings that combined military updates with civil considerations, recognizing that a city's survival depended not only on walls and soldiers, but also on maintaining order, providing supplies, and sustaining hope. Citizens, witnessing the emperor's relentless attention and the coordination of defenses, began to draw courage from his example, forming volunteer units, assisting with barricades, and tending to the wounded, all under the watchful eyes of soldiers. The combination of controlled destruction, strategic planning, and psychological fortitude created a dynamic defense that frustrated enemy commanders, causing disarray and hesitation within their ranks. As the days progressed, he monitored supply levels, rationing provisions, and redirecting resources to areas under the greatest threat. He also engaged in delicate diplomacy, sending emissaries to neighboring regions to secure reinforcements and ensure that external allies were aware of the city's resilience. Night raids continued, Each one a test of coordination, courage, and decision-making under pressure. The emperor personally oversaw countermeasures, deploying specialized squads to intercept infiltrators, extinguish fires threatening critical infrastructure, and maintain surveillance along vulnerable approaches. His strategy was both adaptive and anticipatory, blending pre-planned responses with improvisation and continuously integrating new intelligence. Observers note that his ability to synthesize information, anticipate enemy behavior, and act decisively under pressure was unparalleled, a combination that elevated his leadership above mere authority. By the fourth day, the city's defenses had solidified despite the ongoing chaos. Enemy forces, frustrated by repeated failures, attempted more aggressive assaults, only to encounter coordinated resistance, controlled traps, and an ever-present sense of being watched and countered. Civilians, initially paralyzed by fear, demonstrated resilience, following emergency protocols, maintaining hidden supply caches, and supporting the soldiers in small but vital ways. The emperor's awareness of both the physical and psychological dimensions of warfare proved critical. Understanding morale, perception, and human behavior allowed him to leverage every advantage against a numerically superior opponent. In private moments, he reflected on the moral and emotional toll of his actions, aware that controlled destruction had claimed innocent lives and transformed the city he loved into a tactical instrument. Yet he justified every decision as necessary to preserve the greater population and ensure the empire's survival. Military historians studying the siege emphasized that his integrated approach, combining strategy, psychological insight, and relentless leadership, demonstrates that effective command in extreme circumstances requires not just courage and intelligence, but a willingness to confront unthinkable moral dilemmas. Throughout this period, the emperor also monitored enemy communications, intercepting messages that revealed internal disputes, miscommunications, and growing fear among opposing commanders. He exploited these vulnerabilities with targeted counterattacks and deceptive maneuvers, deepening confusion and weakening coordinated efforts. Soldiers noted his presence on the front lines, his engagement in decision-making, and his insistence on precise execution, all of which reinforced loyalty, focus, and morale. The controlled devastation, once seen as cruel, became an instrument of both defense and psychological warfare, demonstrating the emperor's capacity to transform adversity into strategic advantage. Each successful repulsion of enemy advances was celebrated quietly among defenders, even as fires continued to consume non-critical structures, and the emperor maintained vigilance, knowing that the siege's resolution remained uncertain. By the sixth day, his integrated defensive system, combining physical barriers, active patrols, misinformation, and morale management, had stabilized key sectors of the city. Enemy commanders, facing repeated failures and rising casualties, began to doubt the feasibility of their assault, misjudge tactical positions, and delay attacks. Civilians, seeing the persistence and competence of their ruler, drew courage, assisted in defensive measures, and maintained crucial routines despite the omnipresent threat. The emperor's combination of strategic brilliance, psychological insight, and relentless presence ensured that the city, though scarred and battered, remained under his control. His leadership, blending intellect, foresight, and moral resolve, transformed a situation that could have led to total annihilation into a testament of calculated resilience, illustrating that the line between ruin and survival often rests on decisive, informed, and sometimes devastating choices. As the siege dragged into its final stages, the emperor faced the ultimate test of endurance, strategy, and moral resolve. Each day brought new threats. Enemy reinforcements arrived unexpectedly, supply lines grew tenuous, and exhaustion weighed heavily on both soldiers and civilians. Smoke from the fires of controlled destruction hung thick over the city, turning daylight into a dim, orange haze that distorted perception and heightened anxiety. The emperor, however, remained relentless, personally overseeing the coordination of defenses, ensuring that critical barricades remained intact, and that troops were rotated to prevent fatigue. He conducted inspections of damaged neighborhoods, speaking directly to citizens who had survived the initial chaos, offering reassurance while silently cataloging the vulnerabilities that remained. Every structure destroyed had been part of a larger strategy, a calculated sacrifice meant to slow the enemy while preserving the city's heart. Advisors debated endlessly, some urging negotiation, others advocating aggressive counterattacks, but the emperor's judgment was unyielding, guided by a balance of strategic foresight and moral calculation. He understood that hesitation could embolden the enemy, while rash action could devastate his own people irreparably. During nightfall, when visibility was low and fear ran high, he organized patrols, strategically positioning soldiers to deter infiltration, extinguish uncontrolled fires, and monitor civilian movement. Citizens, though traumatized, followed instructions with disciplined determination, recognizing that the emperor's presence and guidance were key to survival. Skirmishes erupted along critical streets and barricades, often in rapid succession, demanding immediate decisions. The emperor personally coordinated these responses, sometimes sending small squads into danger to reclaim strategic points, always weighing risk against potential gain. Chroniclers later emphasized the psychological impact of his actions. Seeing their ruler exposed to the same dangers and hardships as they endured reinforced loyalty, courage, and determination among both soldiers and civilians. The enemy, increasingly frustrated by repeated failures, attempted a series of coordinated attacks that targeted areas where controlled destruction had been most intense, hoping to exploit disarray. Yet the emperor had anticipated these maneuvers, creating secondary defenses, redirecting troops, and utilizing misinformation to confuse enemy intelligence. Strategic fires were reignited in critical locations, creating barriers and forcing the enemy into predictable paths where defenders could concentrate their strength. Throughout these operations, he remained acutely aware of the human cost, taking pains to minimize civilian casualties while recognizing that absolute avoidance was impossible in a city under siege. He personally oversaw the evacuation of remaining non-combatants from the most vulnerable sectors, deploying soldiers as guides and protectors, ensuring that every possible measure was taken to preserve life amidst chaos. Historian analyses highlight that his capacity to integrate real-time intelligence, physical defenses, psychological management, and moral consideration represents a rare convergence of leadership skills, marking his reign as an extraordinary case study in crisis command. In parallel, the emperor utilized diplomacy to secure external reinforcements and dissuade neighboring regions from siding with the enemy. He sent emissaries under truce flags, offering terms that were carefully worded to project strength while buying time for reinforcements to arrive. These measures, combined with the scorched barriers and the disciplined defense, created a multi-layered strategy that gradually shifted the balance in favor of the defenders. By the 8th day, enemy forces, exhausted, demoralized, and increasingly disorganized, began to falter in their assaults. Soldiers reported confusion in ranks, disputes among commanders, and a growing awareness that the city, though battered, was no longer the easy conquest they had anticipated. The emperor, aware that opportunity was as important as defense, orchestrated counterattacks in weak sectors, targeting isolated enemy units, reclaiming streets, and consolidating control. The combination of psychological pressure, strategic deception, and coordinated military action created an environment in which the enemy's momentum collapsed. Yet, even as victories accumulated, the emperor remained vigilant, recognizing that complacency could undo all previous gains. Fires continued to burn in peripheral sectors, the smoke a constant reminder of sacrifices made to secure survival. Citizens, now accustomed to the rhythm of siege, continued to perform essential tasks under the guidance of military coordinators, maintaining water supplies, tending to wounded, and assisting in fortification repairs. The emperor personally visited command posts, listening to reports, inspecting defenses, and addressing the needs of both soldiers and civilians, demonstrating an unyielding commitment that inspired those around him. Chroniclers note that the siege, while physically destructive, became a testament to the interplay of strategy, courage, and resilience, illustrating that leadership extends beyond command of armies to encompass the moral and psychological dimensions of survival. By the 10th day, enemy forces, suffering attrition, low morale, and constant harassment, began to retreat, their initial advantages nullified by the emperor's relentless application of strategy, sacrifice, and foresight. The city, though scarred and partially destroyed, remained under his control, its population battered but alive, and its symbolic and strategic value preserved. The emperor, standing amidst the ruins, reflected on the profound paradox of his actions. To preserve the city, he had to destroy parts of it. To protect his people, he had ordered destruction that would scar their memories forever. Yet history would judge him not merely by the fires or the rubble, but by his ability to safeguard a throne, protect the lives of countless citizens, and demonstrate extraordinary resilience and foresight under unimaginable pressure. Modern military analysts study the siege to understand the intersection of psychological warfare, controlled destruction, and crisis leadership, noting that the emperor's decisions illustrate the delicate balance between immediate tactical needs and long-term strategic objectives. The lessons extend beyond military strategy. They touch on human behavior, decision-making under duress, and the ethical complexities of leadership where no choice is without consequence. Survivors recounted the tension, fear, and occasional moments of hope that punctuated each day, describing how the emperor's presence reassured them even as flames consumed familiar streets, how the sound of his commands over the din of battle provided direction and stability, and how the calculated chaos ultimately saved the core of the city from complete annihilation. In retrospect, his actions, while controversial, achieved the intended outcome. The throne was preserved, the city survived as a functioning capital, and the enemy's campaign ended in failure. The story remains a chilling reminder of the moral compromises, psychological acumen, and strategic rigor required to lead in extreme circumstances, a testament to the human capacity to endure, adapt, and prevail even when the very home one seeks to protect must be partially sacrificed to ensure survival. The emperor's name endured, not merely as a ruler who burned his own city, but as a leader whose resolve, intellect, and moral courage turned a catastrophe into a story of survival, resilience, and the unflinching execution of strategy under unbearable pressure. Through the lens of history, we see the intricate interplay of human psychology, leadership, and ethics, and the enduring lesson that power, survival, and moral choice are inseparably intertwined, often demanding actions that are as extraordinary as they are agonizing. The story of the emperor who destroyed his own city to save his throne is not merely a tale of strategy and survival. It is a profound exploration of human resilience, moral complexity, and the heavy burden of leadership. He faced decisions that no ordinary ruler could endure, weighing the lives of thousands against the abstract concept of power and legacy. Every fire set, every street turned into a barrier, was a reminder that sometimes the preservation of the whole demands sacrifices that tear at the very fabric of society you are sworn to protect. History remembers him as both a savior and a destroyer, a paradox that continues to fascinate scholars, military strategists, and historians alike. The citizens who survived witnessed firsthand the consequences of absolute authority, yet they also saw the necessity behind actions that would otherwise appear cruel. It is in this tension, the intersection of duty, morality, and survival, that the story resonates most deeply, reminding us that leadership is never simple, and that choices made under pressure often leave scars that outlast the immediate crisis. Modern parallels abound, from decisions in wartime to corporate or political crises, where leaders must navigate competing priorities, moral dilemmas, and the fragile balance between preservation and destruction. The emperor's actions demonstrate the weight of responsibility and the clarity required to act decisively when stakes are unimaginably high. His legacy is a somber lesson. Power, when coupled with foresight, courage, and moral consideration, can avert total disaster, yet the costs are etched forever into memory of those who witness it. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. Your thoughts, questions, and reactions bring history to life, and we want to hear how you interpret the choices, sacrifices, and lessons from the past. By engaging with these stories, you not only honor the memory of those who lived through extraordinary events, but also explore the timeless complexities of human behavior, courage, and the burdens of leadership. Every like, share, and comment helps us continue bringing dark, immersive histories to life, reminding us that the past, with all its triumphs and tragedies, still speaks to the decisions we face today.